Look at section 2, the first part of the section, any person's licensed to do business while carrying on knowingly advises a person selling or transferring property securing a residential window period loan. That doesn't apply anymore. Now the reason I'm bringing this up is because I have received calls over the last month to 6 weeks as to what this statute means. All right? It's being construed one of two ways, neither of which is correct. First of all, there are people who look at it and say, well, it only applies to residential window period loans. There ain't been one of those around 20 years. No, unfortunately, you go to the fourth sentence. It talks about then, it says, or who knowingly otherwise, etc. Well, the statute itself permits due on sale enforcement. Therefore, when it talks about the second part, due on sale clause enforceable under this act, that's a due on sale clause in any mortgage. So that part is still operative. So the view that this doesn't apply to modern mortgages is wrong. Now the other view I hear is, okay, this statute requires a realtor who's involved in the transaction as a listing broker to affirmatively contact the lender to seek their consent to the sell and land contract as required under the due on sale clause. It does not say that either. Okay. You do not have any affirmative obligations under this statute to do anything vis-a-vis contacting the lender. Only reason I say that is because that's what they wanted. When the first draft of this came out and I reviewed it, it said any real estate licensee involved in a sale with a mortgage with due on sale clause shall have the affirmative obligation to contact the lender and obtain their consent. That's not what it ended up saying. It says a lease licensee who knowingly otherwise aids or assists a person in evading the enforcement of a due on sale clause enforceable under this act shall be liable for a civil fine not to exceed $5,000 for each offense, so do lots of land contracts, and shall be subject to revocation of his or her license. You cannot aid or assist someone in evading due on sale enforcement. That does not mean you've become a police officer for the lenders. What it means is you need, if you're going to be in this situation where someone's going to make a sale and there's an underlying mortgage, what you're going to need to do is make certain you advise that seller in writing. You advise the seller that if there's an underlying mortgage on their property, it may have a due on sale clause, and if it does have a due on sale clause, you recommend they contact the lender to obtain the lender's consent. Okay. Everybody know what a due on sale clause is? By the way, I just say that as if it's a provision, and it's in virtually every form mortgage, that says if the mortgagor, the borrower, transfers any interest in the property without the consent of the lender can call the loan. Accelerate it and call the loan and foreclose. All right. Is everybody following what I'm saying? I mean, we have a duty not to say, boy, you got this due on sale clause, hide it. Okay. We're not saying that at all. In fact, we're saying, there's going to be a memorandum of land contract, it's going to be recorded. But we're fulfilling our obligation when we tell them, hey, you should contact your lender. But we have no way of forcing them to do so.
Is there any way we could get language from you about what that should say?
Okay, she's asking whether there's any way that you could get language from me as to what that should say, and I'll do anything for a price. No, I fully intend. It's just come up in the last month. Sure. It's not going to be difficult to come up with this language. What we don't want, and right now, a lot of this is very just theoretical. I mean, think about it. If a lender's got a performing loan and, one of 6 in their portfolio, and they come to find out that, wait a minute, McClellan sold that property on land contract to Jones, I think I'll accelerate and foreclose. I mean, as a practical matter, this is not 1981 where we had savings and loans that thought they were going to go under if they couldn't enforce these things. And they spent huge resources because, interest rates were 17% and they were getting 4% return. They were fighting for their lives. Here, if you've got, I don't know what your experience has been, but trying to get the attention of a lender. Let's assume the seller says, okay, I agree. I'm going to put my letter together and I'm going to send it to Countrywide. Hey guys, I want to sell land contract. Is this okay? And you send it to them. What's the chance they'll ever hear anything? Virtually none. And if they started to call to find the right person, well, see, I'm looking for the person within your organization that has the consents for due on sale enforcement. Do what? So in part, this is all very theoretical, except for the fact of the revocation of license and the $5,000 fine. So I'm not really worried as a practical matter about actual enforcement of these things. I'm just worried if, I don't think any of us saw us being where we are today 3 years ago. So how are we going to know where we're going to be at 3 years from now? And it may well be that suddenly something will change, that lenders will be out there searching for people, kind of like a lot of the commercial lenders are doing right now. They seem to be searching for defaults so they can call their term loans because they got capital liquidity requirements that they're not meeting. So all I'm saying is we have something in our file where we can demonstrate we didn't aid and assist anybody in evading anything. We were the only ones who advised them of the existence of this thing. Okay? We're really good people. All right? Any questions at all? Yes, sir.
I understand this deals with the seller, but wouldn't you want something similar for your buyer? Maybe he should.
Okay. Everybody hear that? This is what we were addressing was warning the seller. The question was, wouldn't you also want to warn the buyer? Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm not worried about them because the statute doesn't apply to them. But as a buyer's agent, they've got to understand. But you're going to have that conversation with them anyway. Because you're going to have that conversation when you're talking about the provision in the land contract where the seller can't mortgage it beyond the balance of the land contract or the monthly payment. That's exactly what that's designed to address. So you are going to be having that discussion with the buyer. And the buyer's got to understand, if the seller doesn't perform, they may have to save themselves, in essence, either assume that mortgage or go out and borrow that amount. And if they're not in a position to do so, they could well lose their property. Okay. Now, as a curiosity, if you look at the handout on due and sell clauses, look at section 7 above. This section, as part of the negotiation with the lenders, is required to be in every purchase agreement in this state where someone, if there's a sale or transfer of residential property which is subject to a mortgage. And when I mean subject to a mortgage, there's a mortgage on that property the date of closing. So essentially it was supposed to be in every purchase agreement. We did for a number of years. We put this statement there. But 20 years of rising property values, reasonably low interest rates, no land contracts, pressure from our clients to shorten our forms, this is gone. It's not in there. If we're going to start selling on land contract again, it's going back in the forms. The law hasn't changed. I just chose to ignore it. There's lots of laws in the books that we ignore, and it's not a problem. This one may be it may be becoming less ignorable. So in any case, it's there, and again, I intentionally took it out 10 years ago because I didn't see any reason for it anymore. Yes, sir?
Leases or variations that we find in the 80s, those all figures due on sale still?
Everybody hear that? He talking about leases and variations on leases that we tried in the 80s. Are those still subject to due on sale? Yes, you should assume they are. That's the other piece of this program that we're not going to get into very much into, but it's when you do a lease with an option to purchase. During the 80s, we were looking for every loophole we could find to keep on selling property and avoiding due on sale clauses. One of those was the 35-year lease, or the lease with the option to purchase with some portion of the lease payments being applied to the purchase price with an option price at the end of X years. It sure looks and smells like a land contract with a 3-year balloon, but we call it a lease with option. Well, unfortunately, until they finally won their fight in the U.S. Supreme Court, they kept filling each hole. As we found them, they filled them. So when we do these leases with option to purchase, again, you're in a situation, if you're representing the seller, and again, with the buyer should be aware of it as well, that you should assume that's going to trigger a due on sale clause. The lease